Computers. This is Intelligent Performance.
Louise Mahler, thank you so much for joining us here on the Intelligent Performance podcast. You're an executive coach, a professional speaker, and a go-to for body language expert when it comes to Channel 7. You've been accepted into the Forbes Coaching Elite, and it's just an absolute pleasure to have you with us today to talk about all things public speaking and how to communicate effectively, Louise. And as with all of our guests, I'd love to start with the question, what is intelligent performance to you?
Intelligent performance actually is, performance is intelligent. So it means knowing what you're doing with the tool that you have, which is your body, which is your voice, and which is your structure. So intelligent performance for me is having that knowledge at your fingertips.
I love that. It's a really great way to think about it, because I think to perform well, it's certainly, you do need to involve a lot of intelligence, right? And you're certainly the expert, a go-to expert in this space. Can you just give a bit of context to how you got to this space, Louise? What was it that kind of led you down this path, as it were, to be this kind of preeminent go-to person when it comes to communication and more broadly body language as well?
Yeah, well, it was a conglomeration of skills, and I guess critical was that I sang opera. I sang opera for a decade, and
wow.
and studied and got the opportunity through the Vienna State Opera to be hanging around with the world greats and to be seeing what they were doing. And I really do think that opera is the hardest thing in the world, standing in front of thousands of people and making a sound. You know, it's tough. It's a tough.
Yeah.
And so I got this knowledge, and then coming into business, I would watch people and think, they didn't have these skills at all. And I became driven and passionate about finding, how do I apply these skills that I discovered to our everyday life, working life? And is the theory the same? Are the actions the same? How does it work? And that's been a passion for me for decades. And of course, then I did, further study, masters in org psych and a PhD in leadership communication, and practice.
Wow. So tell me about the opera just briefly. What was it like? I speak to ballet dancers actually, and they talk about how high pressure this world is in terms of performing on stage. Is opera similar, or what's it actually like in reality?
The reality is that there are a few people up here who are rich and famous, and then everyone else is fighting for their lives. And you get to the top of that pack and you're just about there, but you're fighting for your life. So actually, when I was in Vienna, someone was murdered in the toilets by another performer.
Wow.
I personally was beaten up twice by people who were sharing my role, twice. And I'd get anonymous letters, and it's like being an Olympian. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You watch what you eat, you watch what you say, you watch where you go, you only hang out with people in the profession. It's all consuming. It's very difficult, and it's like going into a cave.
The violence piece, that sounds horrific, Louise. Why was it so combative?
Well, when I went to Vienna, those other people who joined that year, they're not from Brisbane, Australia, as I originally was. They have come from very difficult backgrounds in the north of Russia, Serbia, Czech Republic, very difficult backgrounds. And basically, if they didn't get the role, they went back home and down the coal mine. So
wow.
People were fighting for their lives.
Interesting. Okay, well, that certainly would have to elevate your performance to a whole new level. So what do people get wrong around public speaking, Louise? When you kind of come back, I feel like public speaking would be relatively easy compared to singing your heart out on stage for hours on end in Latin or something similar, right? What are the transferable skills, firstly?
Hello. And what about voice? I cannot believe people get out on stage. Good morning, everyone. And I'm like, what are you doing? voices, that sort of thing. A little bit of vocal, a little bit of, vocal damage comes in. Just ridiculous things with their voice, number one. Number
Right.
two, people are not moving, and they're not moving congruently. They're not moving to the right psychological spaces. And the next thing is that they can't breathe. People can't breathe in. Everyone's breathing, I'm looking really stupid. And then arms stuck to the body. Stuck to the body. So it's all about the skills of gravitas, which are the skills of delivery, are lost in our world. Lost.
Let's break these down individually. And thanks for bringing up gravitas, because that's the name of your book. I also looked up the definition of gravitas. I've got on my screen here. So dignity, seriousness, or solemnity of manner. Tricky word that.
Yeah.
So why gravitas?
Well, not really. So the interesting thing was that gravitas is the manner of trust and respect. That's what gravitas is. And the thing was that with my work and the knowledge that I've got, I've formed certain opinions. And then people kept coming and saying, oh, I've been told I need gravitas. And I'm like, oh, well, what is that? And then eventually I went back and looked at what gravitas was. And just went, that's all the things that we get in our training. And it was funny because in the singing training, and it's funny because actually I think that the skills of gravitas have come up in that field, and that opera has very much been influenced by gravitas. So it's not an accident that the skills that I have are gravitas. So my point is, everything old is new again. There is nothing new on the planet. We as humans have been exactly the same for 300,000 years. And let's have a look at those 300 years and think, when did people do it well? Oh, I know, ancient Rome. Aha, what did they call it? Oh, they called it gravitas. How about we bring that to now and learn from those skills? So hence I looked into gravitas. And the interesting thing about the definition of gravitas is that, yes, it's seriousness, but it's actually equally weighted with levity, humor, and wit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And so tell us about, what did you find historically when you looked back, Louise? Why was it maybe forgotten? Is it because the medium's changed now? Is it because...
Great question. Why it's forgotten is actually, there's a really, really clear reason. And the reason is this: Aristotle. So Aristotle actually formed 5 areas of rhetoric, which is the things you need to work on for gravitas. One is do you know your information? How do you arrange it? What is your language? What is your memory? And how do you deliver? And the thing is, Aristotle said, well, look, I'm really good at knowing your language, these 2 here. So even though there are 5, I'm good at those 2. So let's talk about those 2. And so today we tend to think that gravitas is just those 2. And it's not. Actually, when you go back to the writings, everyone says the major one was delivery. In fact, there's a great orator called Demosthenes who said the 3rd most important one is delivery. The 2nd most important one is delivery. And the 1st most important one is delivery. Everything. But Aristotle said, oh, well, other people wrote about delivery. Well, that might be true, but that work is lost. And
Right.
we have Cicero and Quintilian, who are the major sources, a little bit from Aristotle, who said, who said, I don't deal with delivery, but he did write some. So Cicero and Quintilian, delivery. That's...
And I missed, forgive me, I missed. So why was it that we've forgotten about it?
Because we only have Aristotle's writing. That's what God, and he only dealt in 2 areas.
Got you. Okay, I'm with you. Okay, so you look more broadly than just Aristotle. And so how people given access, you touched on voice, right? Not everyone can go and spend 10 years on becoming an opera singer, voice projection. You mimicked some of those speaking traits of those speakers who kind of jump on with a mousy voice. What would you say to someone who perhaps doesn't feel that confident when it comes to projection, isn't a singer, isn't even musical of some description, but now finds themselves in a leadership role say, and now they're like, maybe they're the GM of something, and okay, I can actually communicate to a whole group of people here.
Yeah. So first of all, realize that voice is a choice. You have total control to change your voice. It's not that hard, because this is not singing. Singing is hard. Singing has practice. Speaking doesn't. Speaking really, and fascinating when it comes to gravitas, the ancients realized that singing, you didn't have to, run around the block the whole time and clear. You didn't have to do anything like that. You need to line your body up so that your body is straight, your instrument is straight and loose, and then apply your air. That's it. That's what voice is. And so few people can do that. They can't initiate sound freely. So we tend to do things like use our head to initiate sound, or stick the tongue down the throat, or just have a lot of jaw tension that we're unaware of, or just, stop the air altogether so that we get vocal fry. People stop the air altogether and there's no air, and the vocal folds malfunction. We do really, and then just fall perhaps for our visual preference so that we go up all the time, and then upwards inflection at the end of a sentence and turn everything into a question. These are all curable, all easily.
Wow.
We don't discuss the topic. No one ever gives us proper feedback and the tricks to fix it. And it's easily fixed.
Interesting. So straighten up and breathe. Well, actually, let's touch on breathing, because you said that's a key area. And then I really want to touch on movement, because I think out of all the guests I've ever had on here, Louise, you certainly move the most, right? I had a guy on recently. I think it was a different podcast, and he sat there really quite timidly. What he was saying was phenomenal. Actually, I found some of the incredibly insightful academic background, but the way you communicate seems to be, I feel like maybe that's quite a common trait of academics, that they have great stuff, but in terms of that delivery, it's often missing, right? So talk to us about the breathing piece.
Well, it's funnily enough, the breathing and the arms go together, because one of our ways of holding our breath is to stick our arms to the body. And I was recently sent a video, and the lady spoke like this and she spoke like that, and then she said, now I will pass to the gentleman. She passed to the gentleman and he stood like this. And I'm like, which part of this are you not getting? It's the most boring thing I've ever seen. And have you got arms? Have you got weird. So the arms stick to the body as a way of holding our breath, and we've got to realize that and get arms off the body. Arms wide, get them out, get them doing things. And of course, we're not just wildly gesturing, we're actually doing them congruently, non-repeat, and held as well. Anyway, blah blah, more of that later. But for our breath, we've got to get our arms off our body. We've got to get the body up straight so that the diaphragm can actually work, and we've got to get loose. And I find that in speaking is that people are going down the wrong path of thought, and the wrong path of thought that they have is that they're saying, what I need to do is relax. As a professional public speaker, let me tell you, the last thing I do on stage is relax. Why would you be aiming to relax? I'm trying to get my energy into the right effective ways in my body and influencing others. The word influence comes from the verb spirare, to breathe. I want to inspire others. I need to get breath out of my body. So how do I do that? Is an action. It's not a relaxation. And our focus is on the breath out, working on the breath out, not the breath in. So I'm not breathing in, and I'm not working on relaxing.
Sorry, you're not breathing in. Is that what you said?
Well, I do breathe in, but I don't focus on breathing in. I focus on breathing out.
Okay.
I learned this from singing, is that when you sing, you get a tiny little gap to breathe and then sing. I don't have time to go sing. sing, 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 sing. I don't. It's bar, bar, black sheep. Have you any wool? Yes, sir, 3 bags full. I don't have time to think of the breath. The breath must automatically. You have to focus on the breath out.
The thing to that piece, though, and this is something I found on a podcast recently, I had a really sensitive mic in front of me. And when I listened back, I ended up hearing kind of like I would blah, 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 let's say, blah, blah, oh, sorry, blah, blah, black sheep, let's just say. And then that's what I heard on the back recording of it, Louise. So just to touch on that bit, if you don't focus on your breath, then that actually can kind of spike a mic, as an example.
No. So tell me what sound you heard.
It was like you could really hear my in breath, and it's something I've never been.
Here was tension.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
What we could hear. So when you close the tube, so that's why you've got to give all the air out and then drop. Take the air in. So you don't. It's when we take breath in and contract that you hear the breath in.
Interesting. This wasn't intended to be a coaching session, but this is very helpful. So thank you. Tell me, movement now. You've been moving a lot more on this than most people do. What's the psychology, firstly, around movement? What's so important about it?
I need movement to attract attention. Look over here. I need movement because movement frees the body. Without movement, I can't breathe properly. So I have to move. The other thing is it guides the eye psychologically. So when I'm on the center of the screen, that's the power position. When I move to the side, that's what's called a facilitator position. If I were to guide you to the back here of the screen, that's called the coaching position. There are many, and then I can anchor my own positions. For the past, the present, the future, where are they on the screen? And I can really psychologically guide you by moving my body, moving my hands, creating space. The ancient Romans called it architecturally designing your presentation. So you make an architectural design of where information sits and then anchor it with your hands or your body. Yeah, so I spoke about the past here on my left. If I now mention the past, it's back there. You know it's back there. I anchored it back there. So there we are.
Got you. And just talk to me about the literature you found. Are you saying that the ancient Romans, they went to the effort of documenting exactly this in terms of the movement required, how to do it, how to kind of gesticulate powerfully to kind of attract attention, as you say, and then to make or kind of highlight points?
Yeah, they did.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally they did. Yes. And they have documented. There's a fabulous fellow called Aldrete in America, and he very much tweaked my interest and wrote a book called Gestures and Acclamations of Ancient Rome. Hilarious. I mean, what a study. And he collected pictures of all of the different gestures. They have many gestures, and I've documented them in the book with his permission. Gravitas. And so, for instance, I mentioned the past is back here, the future is on the right, the present is here. Horror, therefore, is always pushed to the left, and adoration is always 2 hands lifting up to the right. Facts are thumb and finger together. Facts. If you don't have all the facts, but you have some of the facts, you curl the fingers in. They had very specific meanings for the fingers and the arms.
And is that you have to know those meanings for it to make sense? Or does that feels those kind of, what did you say? Just gesticular movements. So that kind of speaks to our humanness, does it?
What a great way of putting it. It speaks to our humanness, and people get it. People absolutely get it. And of course, these were used by leaders of the past because they knew that it worked.
Interesting. Because you see a lot on the political stage, this kind of thumb on the top, I think Bill was in ScoMo was very big on something like this when they're trying to make a point, and you see pommy politicians often speaking in this manner, quite definitive, like they're pointing, but they're not pointing. It's not aggressive. So it's interesting how politicians do it, but then in a corporate context, I think if you copied what a politician's doing, then you can really come across as inauthentic. It's not the right flavor. So how do people pick up these gestures when they're trying to make it an authentic conversation for them, Louise, without...
You embody it. And the other thing is you practice. People have lost the concept of practice, of taking something on and then practicing it until you own it. So I'm always encouraging people to practice different gestures and techniques at the coffee shop while ordering coffee.
Right.
Coffee person won't jump the counter and go, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're right. They don't. And people, magicians, of course, know this, that people watch consciously far less than you think they do. You can do lots of weird things and people will not recognize. So you do it until you own it. So for instance, with a PowerPoint or a slide or, anything, piece of paper that you've got, you use a technique called touch, turn, talk. So that means I might say to you, let's have a look at these books on the back shelf, and I guide you with my hand. And then I turn around and say, these are the books on the shelf. That's called touch, turn, talk. That's the technique. But I suggest to you that touch, turn technique needs to be in your body so that as you're at the dinner table, you use the same technique to say to somebody, would you like a glass of water? Would you like a glass of water? That's still touch, turn, talk. And it becomes just good practice within your body. And even Aristotle was asked, are you different on stage in your work or in the courts than you are in real life? He said, of course not. I'm exactly the same.
Wow.
And that's it, because the techniques, you don't, for instance, have a voice that is different now to the voice that's at the coffee shop or on stage. But people, they let tension get into the voice when they get on the stage. That's ridiculous.
You've got a great Julia Gillard impression, Louise, which you did earlier. I heard it. I didn't comment at the time, but it was...
Gillard throws her head. She throws...
Yeah.
It's called a chook. She throws her head, What it does is it alters the sound, alters the sound, tightens the sound, and also it stops you breathing properly. It breaks the sins. And it's just really a stupid thing to do.
Is it beneficial in any way, or is it just
no
really...
way whatsoever. We think that it's power, but actually it's quite aggressive and choppy, and it totally undermines the message. To use your head for sound is ridiculous. That it's not involved in making sound. You need to keep your head still. Bah, bah. We don't throw the head.
We've done voice, we've done breathing, we've done movement. And one thing you touched on just before we jumped on was humor, actually, and about how important humor is in terms of weaving or in terms of communicating. Speak to us the historical complexities, or what did they find in ancient Rome? What was the power of humor, or what is the power of humor, Louise?
Oh, the power of humor is to soften the brain, to let information in. The issue is that where do you put humor, and what's your flow, what's your arrangement to make it psychologically sound? And people might say things like, I throw in a joke, and I'm like, you what? Where? Why? Where's it leading to? Well, and of course you throw in jokes, but they have to lead somewhere. You can't do icebreakers. You can't do icebreakers in a presentation, in a keynote. It must be what I call a creative link, which means that it's something creative, funny, that leads to a message.
Can you give us an example in terms of that? Like, because an icebreaker in terms of what you're saying,
right?
Is it to kind of go for it?
here on this screen is that I sit in a certain position. I cover most of the screen. My head's just below the top. I'm in the middle. I've got chest in here. That's the position because size matters. So I could say that, but I could also say if you fell in the ocean, how do you save yourself? How do you give yourself a 50% chance of not being eaten by a shark?
No idea.
Take a friend. So that gets a laugh, is right. That's kind of not relevant. But then I say, but if you're in the ocean, really, and there are sharks, and we were together, our best chance of success is to huddle together and make ourselves a bigger animal because size matters. A shark won't attack something bigger, and people won't attack something bigger. So how do we make ourselves the biggest that we can on the screen while being professional and not imposing into the space of intimacy, but actually keeping it professional? Well, that is by having your head just below the screen, being in the middle, showing some chest. It's just,
Okay.
you know,
Interesting. So humor is serving the point versus how people tend to use humor is it's distraction largely from something else. Is that right?
whereas this is attraction.
You're right. Interesting. So it's a continuation, but that sounds like it has to be very highly crafted. Louise, would that be fair? Or like, is there a place for spontaneity in there?
It's intelligent. It's not highly crafted. It's just
Okay.
thinking about what you're doing. And it's constantly being aware that jokes come in threes. So I might say, if I ask people to breathe, and I'll say, whose stomach went in? Yeah. And I look really serious, one hand up, keep that up. Whose stomach went out? Yeah, right. Keep those two hands. Who's got no idea what they're doing? So that's number 3. The third one has to be a joke.
Got you.
I
Interesting.
always realize if I say something, 1, say something, 2, think, oh, Louise, think of something funny. 3, bang.
Got you. Okay.
That's
And
just,
the reason for that is it just kind of completes it and then it allows you to move on. Is that
well,
the point?
it's psychologically studied that it works.
Right.
Well, first of all, the ancient Romans have a phrase, omne trium perfectum. Everything in threes is perfect. And you have to remember that at all times. Everything in threes is perfect. And jokes come in threes. And the third one is the punchline.
It seems like a lot, Louise. It seems like a lot to take on. It seems like a lot to navigate, right?
Hear it. I won't hear it. I won't hear a lot. So the barriers to this work are people go, oh, hey, it's hard. I go, no, it's not. It's actually really easy. It's really easy. And then they go, oh no, but I don't feel comfortable. Yeah, we'll get comfortable. Start practicing. Oh no, other people won't feel comfortable. Well, let me tell you, they do. So drop that. So these are barriers to success. I just can't start yelling when you go, it's hard. It's not. It's not. They are barriers to change.
Interesting. Interesting.
You see, in the ancient Romans, they were dedicated to this practice and improvement. And this is personal development. It's not just professional.
Yeah.
And we've let it go. We don't understand the skills anymore. We don't understand the concept of practice and the psychology of change, where we're constantly putting up barriers and we need to identify them like it's hard and just go, no, it's not. No, it's not. We will not allow that thinking.
The practice piece, I think it's really interesting. So I grew up learning the cello, hated this, but I had to do it, right? I'd often frequently not practice and then get there and tell my teacher. I was like, oh, she's like, oh, it really sounds like you practice. And I kind of like, yeah, so practice, when I hear practice, that's what I think of. I like, oh, that's back to those days, or that's what you do with a musical instrument. Why do you think we've lost the elements or the discipline perhaps around, or the respect maybe for practice?
I don't know. I do think that there's going down a minefield, that there is an area of devoicing the population. If we de-voice you, take away your skills of communication, you have no voice. And there's something human about devoicing others so that only the powerful survive. And look, here's a weird thought, but the ancient Romans would say that these skills must only be used by people of good intention, good moral, good people. And what's happening is the good people aren't being taught the skills, are being devoiced and put away, and the bad people who picks up these skills, people who learn them, or psychopaths. So it's the psychopaths who've got the skills who are then leading society. And I'm looking at them going, can you not see what they're doing? And everyone's like, no, that was very good, very interesting, that point they made. I'm like, no, you're being hypnotized. You're being hypnotized for evil intention. Hypnotism is good, but for good intention, not for evil intention. So it's a very serious topic.
The devoicing part, where do you see that play out most?
Oh, in business. I see it play out most in business, and I see it play out most for women in business.
Interesting. In what context? As in, like, devoicing sounds like it's a very intentional removal of a voice. Is that what you're alluding to?
It is the intent, not the literal voice, the figurative voice. So people shut up. And if they don't shut up, they speak with their arms stuck to their side, their head thrown forward, and their voice tone, which nobody wants to listen to. And so that is a devoicing, because if we don't want to listen to you, or you're not going to speak, that is devoicing. And that it's really bad. And you think of an example. Actually, I have an example of someone I spoke to yesterday who had a family member who had a baby, and the midwife who was there, or the nurse that was there, knew there were problems, but the surgeon had said to her, don't you call me at home unless absolutely necessary. Well, the woman was too frightened to call him. The baby was born with strokes and now has cerebral palsy. And that was all a consequence of not speaking up, of being devoiced by somebody and not speaking up. And it has dramatically affected lives.
So it sounds like there's a real opportunity for those who understand that effective communication is very much a skill. It sounds like there's actually tried and tested methodologies which people can apply, which can learn, not that it's this inherent, what's the word? Talent, right? This kind of word which gets handed around so much. It's like, oh, she's such a great speaker. He's just such a, great orator. It's not that. What is what you're saying? You're saying, actually, if you spend the time to focus, diligently practice, improve, learn it so it becomes natural, then actually...
Natural, it becomes habitual.
Habitual. Yeah, right. It's very powerful. It's a really interesting skill, Louise. I think it's one which people could do a lot from, especially in the world where, actually think about online, right? A lot of us are on camera a lot more than we ever have been, but not many people actually practice being on camera or being effective on camera, right?
And we're competing with television.
100%.
Yeah. So you better get it right, or you're divorced.
Yes. Yes.
To me, something fascinating recently. They said about the media, and they said, "Oh, I don't want to go on the media. It's not all about me." I looked at it and thought, "Are you nuts? Of course, it's not about you. Media is about getting your message out to others."
Yeah.
How could you misinterpret that as being about you? That's again barrier to success.
Interesting.
Way of devoicing.
Louise, where I want to take the last bit of this conversation is you are brought on to Channel 7 News to kind of talk about body language. You're talking about royals, Harry and Meghan over in the US. You're brought in to kind of advise or give your perspective around what their body language says more than what the words which are coming out their mouth. Yeah. We've just seen Kate, Princess Kate over in the UK, talk about her cancer diagnosis. Very kind of withdrawn, what's the word? Classic royal message in terms of delivery. What did you take from what's not being said, do you think, but actually being said by body language, perhaps?
What's being said to me by Kate is that this is a very serious issue. and we're talking about, we use the words preventative chemo, I have questions about that. Normally her hands would be to two sides. She had her hands in the middle. She had her hands clasped. Her thumbs were moving. Her fingers were going. It was all a giveaway in the hands, caressing her thumbs. And then when she said, we will get through this, her leg shot out. You know, it's kind of an action. We're going to get through it. Like really, there's a desperate need for action. And she looked devastated, panicked, worried beyond belief.
It's an awful diagnosis, isn't it? I think it was interesting framing. Just what did you call it? Preventative
Chemo.
It's a very powerful word, preventative, but it's essentially the same thing.
Well, they're going to blast her, aren't they? You know, she's such an important person. Don't leave it up to chance.
Yeah.
You know, here you go. So sad.
Yeah, it's incredibly. Yeah, very, very tricky topic. But it's who do you see more broadly? You know, obviously the US elections are coming up now. Who are the people you look at and go, maybe they're what is said and what they really say? Who do you find to be most incongruent out of interest?
I find Trump fascinating. I could watch Trump all day.
Right.
He has very intelligent performance. He knows exactly what he is doing and what techniques he's using. And it goes back to a lot of documented work on his handshake, which is different for every person, depending on what message he's wanting to send. And I don't think he's a bad person. I worry that his intention is personal, for personal gain, and that his actions are motivated by personal gain, not national success, and therefore that's kind of incongruent. I'm questioning that.
Yeah, Louise, awesome. Thank you so much. I love your perspective on all this. It's been an absolute fascinating conversation. I am scrutinizing my movements over here as I kind of scratch my hands and like, what am I really communicating? Louise,
you're very beautiful, and I can tell you, beautiful people get away with murder.
Louise, we should talk about that much more on the next one. It's well, Louise, you've got your book out, Gravitas. You also got another book. I think is it Purposeful? Forgive me. It's the Resonate. I do apologize. And those books are available on your website, which we're going to link to in the show notes on the bottom of this episode. But Louise, thank you so much for giving your guidance, your tips, and confronting my points, which you completely disagree with around that. It doesn't sound bad. After all, I love it that you started to shout at me. That's great. So, Louise, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Bye.